Welcome back for our penultimate session of the Open Web Forum, curated by Fabric Ventures. We had an awesome panel this morning on NFTs and creator monetization, so I'm really looking forward to the next session, diving into some real-time productive use cases. Now it's time for gaming, shifting from play-to-win to play-to-earn game models, moderated by Max Mersch, partner at Fabric Ventures. As COVID-19 left many out of work, generating yield in blockchain games has provided them with some respite. But this is just the beginning of a new paradigm that rewards participants for their efforts. Over to you, Max.
Super. Thanks a lot for the intro, Nata. So the title of the panel really is around gaming, but what I want to focus on most with the content is really the economies that are created within these games. So with this sort of shift towards having provable, scarce digital assets, we actually have entire economies that are forming within games. And so instead of having the previous models that we knew and loved from the gaming ecosystem, where it was one-to-many, where it was one company that was selling skins or any boosters to their players, you all of a sudden have a many-to-many economy where individuals are able to trade amongst them, users are able to trade amongst themselves. And more importantly, the value is really captured by the community of users, not only by the centralized company. And so you all of a sudden have people making a living off of gaming, whether it's a full-time job or it's a side gig. There's real revenues involved within the gaming economy. And so we shift from, as Lata mentioned, this pay-to-win model of gaming all the way to a play-to-earn concept. And so we're joined by three fantastic individuals, Gabby, Brian, and Jiho, who are building three of the most exciting companies in the space. That's Sorare in the case of Brian, Axie Infinity in the case of Jiho, and Yield Games in the case of Gabby. Fabric is thrilled to be able to work with all three of them on various fronts as an investor. And then actually there's also a fourth team or project that we'll be speaking about, which is Blackpool, which Fabric has helped set up, and I will be speaking about from my side. But so with that being said, it'd be great to get an introduction from all three of our panelists, maybe starting with Brian or Jiho, just to get the base layer of Axie and Sorare before moving on to Yield.
I'm Jiho. I'm a co-founder of Axie Infinity / Sky Mavis. Sky Mavis builds, or is the kind of inventor of Axie. Axie is a play-to-earn NFT game that centers around these cute but pretty fierce, adorable pets. You can battle them to earn various cryptocurrencies, and I think our kind of defining feature has been this player-owned economy where, as Max mentioned, majority of the value that's kind of being transferred in the game is actually accruing to the community that's playing the game.
Cool. And I'm Brian O'Hagan, so I'm leading growth at Sorare. Sorare is a fantasy football game where you can play with unique digital cards representing football players. And these cards are officially licensed NFTs that you can play in Sorare's game, but also in 5 or 6 other games today. And we've partnered with over 140 different clubs, and we've just announced our first football association with France that joined the game on Monday.
Okay, my turn. So my name is Gabby. I'm co-founder of Yield Games, or YGG. So we are a play-to-earn gaming guild. So we are basically a gaming community that invests in NFTs in different play-to-earn games. So most notably in Axie Infinity and others such as Formula 1 Delta Time, Sandbox, Illuvium, and a couple more. And we lend out these NFTs to our player community so that they can earn income from playing these games without having to pay the upfront cost of these NFTs.
Super. And then, as mentioned briefly, Blackpool is also an outfit that we helped set up almost a year ago now, which is a collective of people who are deep involved in the NFT space and actually pool some of these NFTs across various platforms, including Axie, but also Sorare, and Comet, amongst others, and are able to actually utilize those NFTs to generate yield within the game economies. But so starting off the topic, and we had a few sessions this morning around NFTs and what they enable for open media companies, but more specifically for the gaming space, it would be great to maybe get a quick overview as to what wasn't previously possible. What does this technology enable you to build that just wasn't there before? Is it just the fact that you have these provably scarce digital assets, or is it also the fact that you can actually organize individuals, actors, whether humans or machines, across DAOs to coordinate in a productive manner across some of these assets within these economies? Maybe Gabby, you can start, given you are on that side.
Sure. So guilds have existed before. So there have been guilds as long as there have been kind of multiplayer games in RuneScape or World of Warcraft or even Diablo. So I guess what's different is that with DAOs, you can be a collective that can invest in NFTs. And so so we have the DAO owns wallets where we invest in these NFTs, and then we're able to lend these out to our player base. So that means that the guild itself is holding significant amounts of value. So we have basically millions of dollars worth of NFTs in Axie Infinity, in Sandbox, in Formula 1 Delta Time that our players are using. And this is the part that's have never really been possible before. So beforehand, most of the items, like, they could have had value, but they were usually sold on kind of a gray market or black market, and it was against the terms of service to actually trade in-game items for real money. But with an NFT and player-owned economy, these economies are part of the game, and player trading is a core part of the design model of the game. And yeah, that's what allows what we're doing.
Super. And one of the elements that I really wanted to dive into, and you mentioned it in terms of the value that sort of Yield Guild holds, for example, a lot of the numbers that one sees in the press are huge numbers in terms of the value of certain NFTs, whether it's specific Sorare cards, whether it's quad mystic Axies. But I think it's really important to dive into the entire spectrum of users who end up being able to participate within these economies. So in the case of Axie Infinity, of course, you have these sort of 3 quad mystic Axies, which I'm not even sure I would try to put a price tag on today. I know 2 of the holders, and they certainly aren't looking to sell at the moment. Maybe Jiho has some more ideas, but it goes all the way to what Gabby was describing around being able to lend some of these Axies to players who don't have the upfront capital to participate inside the economy, and actually split the economics and the revenues and the yield that those Axies generate with the end user who's using them. And so you really have a large, broad spectrum of players who are able to participate. And equally in Sorare, I know that a lot of people have started off by getting a few common cards that they set up in a team, participate in a fantasy league, and they watch a football game totally differently at that point in time because they have skin in the game. But equally, on the very high end of cards, you have cards going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You even end up competing with certain football players in certain auctions at some points in time. But maybe if you could both speak about the 2 separate platforms, about the broad spectrum of users that end up playing Axie and Sorare, really to demonstrate that it's not just crypto wealthy individuals, but it's really every single individual out there that has a passion for either the sports world or the gaming world.
Sure. So I think I'll go first. There's definitely an incredibly diverse range of archetypes of people interacting in these digital economies. I think we Axie is becoming something that's far more than a game. We can see it as a burgeoning digital nation, and within this economy, right? We have farmers, right? They might be guildmates in something like Yield Guild, where they're just they're playing the game, they're grinding, they're earning in-game resources which they can sell for maybe $20 a day. But then you also have, right, you have obviously your collectors who they're very interested in the social aspect of it, right? They may own a guild, they may really want to own just like the most rare assets within the ecosystem, right? They might be making business connections. They might be starting kind of funds or syndicates based on their connections within our universe. But then you also have kind of traders or liquidity providers, right? Where, these are the people that would have been, playing the World of Warcraft auction house, right? But in this case, you're dealing with real money, real assets that people own, and that you're, interacting through trustless smart contracts. So, and you also, of course, you have the people in our ecosystem who are battling, right, for glory, right? They want to win tournaments, they want a recognition. So there's this awesome esports scene that's even, kind of developing around Axie. So there are definitely a lot of archetypes. I also will say that there are micro influencers who are, they feel so attached to the game, so connected to the game because the incentives are aligned that, they may try streaming for the first time. They might become a YouTuber just because they want to tell the entire world about Axie Infinity, right? There's so many ways to play, right? Some people, they don't spend much time in game, but they just want to evangelize. And I think it really is because Web3, right? These new systems allow us to really align the incentives between everyone within the ecosystem. So I think it's really amazing. It's kind of like a hive mind, right? Where there's many different moving parts kind of working together.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Jeff was saying. I think, having NFTs in game changes the relationship gamers have with the game. They totally vested in, and they feel like more than just gamers, but actually kind of equity holders or shareholders of the game, which means that the community is just very different, a lot more engaged, and that's great to see. And in Sorare's case, we've got a bit of the same archetypes, whilst some differences because it's a different game. We have the fancy gamers. I would say that the number one type of users that we have today are just purely fantasy gamers interested in football, but maybe in other fancy games, in other sports, but they still join Sorare because they want to see what a fancy game with NFTs look like. And then we have the collectors also, and also the traders that bring liquidity in the market. But really, what's been exciting to see is that since football is a sport that has 4 billion fans in the world, it's kind of a game that speaks to everyone that just likes the sport, and very excited to see users from more than 140 or 50 different countries that own a Sorare card today. So yeah, it's just really about making it accessible and democratic in the sense that anyone anywhere can connect and play on the game and connect with their favorite football players.
Yeah. And actually, we have a question coming live from someone who's listening, asking how exactly you'd suggest getting started if you haven't necessarily put in a large outlay of capital into NFT space before. You want to probably learn before you do that. Where is the best place to start off with Sorare, with Axie, with Yield Guild, in terms of getting an account up, getting started, getting the experience without having to put up capital? And maybe as an additional point to that question, from your perspective, in terms of capital, what are usually the amounts that people have to put up to start playing, or is that something that you're actively working on to make it more accessible to a broader set of audiences? And so where do you see the space going, especially now that we have maybe an initial NFT hype phase and are moving into more sustainable and longer term cycles?
So I'll start with this. So at Yield Guild, we actually try to make it so that the players who are coming in start with no capital outlay on their end. So for example, with the lending or the scholarship program that we have in Axie Infinity, we provide them with the Axies and the accounts so that people can log in, start playing the game, learn it, and actually start earning some SLP or smooth lab potions for themselves. And from here, usually we want to onboard people to the game first, and then they kind of learn blockchain along the way. Because if you get in someone and then they tell them you have to install a MetaMask wallet, a Ronin wallet, download an app, like the onboarding is usually kind of pretty rough. So we want to get them in, start playing, and then while they're playing, having fun, learning the game, earning money, that's kind of when we teach blockchain along the way.
That's fantastic. That really shows off that it is a fun first experience, but actually ends up turning into an education into the blockchain ecosystem, as well as actually potentially becoming a income generator over a longer period of time. But so on that topic of income or yield, as I guess a lot of the more DeFi crowd like to call it, what I think has really been nailed on the head by both Sorare and Axie Infinity compared to a lot of other NFT platforms out there is the fact that these assets that you've issued, whether they are the Axies or the Sorare cards, are ultimately productive assets. You've both mentioned that they have collector value as well, and you have a large community of collectors, but they can also be used within gaming arenas to earn SLP, or within fantasy leagues in Sorare to compete on a twice per week basis and try to top the charts in terms of points scored based off of real world football games. And to ultimately earn ETH or other cards. And so I think it'd be great to dive a bit into where exactly that yield is coming from. What is the value that is being distributed to the gamers? And how do you foresee that going forward once you scale to not the next 10,000, 100,000 people, but the next 50 million users? And sorry, maybe Brian, you can start with that.
For sure. So yeah, the reward model in Sorare is, the cards are useful because you can, use them in these fancy games, and depending on your ranking, you will be able to either earn new cards because you've ranked among the top in the leaderboard, or if you can also beat the game. And if you do beat the game, in that case, you can earn some ETH every week, actually twice a week. And so that's mainly the way the reward model is organized. I think the yield from Sorare really comes from the work and the effort in terms of looking at, who's competing that week, really understanding the fantasy aspect and investing time and resource in it so that you can actually not make a profit, but make a profit from your expertise in the football world. So that's really where the yield is coming. And I think, something that is probably similar with Axies, the more you grind, the more you work on your skills, the more potential reward you will get from this. And so I think, it needs to have this kind of meritocratic aspect in the game. And that's how we kind of designing the yields valuation aspect in the game. So yeah, that's been very exciting to see how people have been impacted within that core loop of composing a team, enjoying the live experience, earning rewards, and with these rewards collecting more cards. And this is kind of the core loop of the game. On top of yield generation, it's also having a lot of fun, which I think is the core objective of any game.
So I'll speak a little bit about where's the value, where's the yield coming from within Axie. So, as Gabby mentioned, there's an in-game resource right now within Axie called the Smooth Love Potion, or SLP abbreviated. And the only way to create Axies within our ecosystem is by using or burning these potions, right? And the only way for someone to get started is to have 3 Axies, right? So basically, as new users come into the ecosystem and people require Axies, this creates an underlying demand for these potions, right? Some people might want a huge collection of Axies. Some people might need a big collection of Axies for scholarships. Some people just love Axies because they're pets, right? There's an emotional attachment to them. So, basically, every Axie is the result of hard work, right? Blood, sweat, tears of people who are actually playing the game. And there are also people who like to trade this token, Smooth Love Potion. Why? Because they know that, you know, at Sky Mavis, the creators of the game, we don't own any, right? So every single small love potion or smooth love potion that's out there, you know, there's been real effort put into creating it. So yeah, you know, there's about $30 million of volume, I think, per day of these of these smooth love potions. They're on pretty prominent exchanges like Binance. That's the primary, right? That's the kind of the main loop that's driven a lot of the play to earn growth so far. In the future, right, I think it's, you know, going to also be about sponsors, other organizations, right? Like, you know, the network effect of Axie is becoming really powerful, right? And organizations are increasingly coming to us saying, hey, we want to sponsor an Axie tournament, or we just want to buy, right? We want to buy a bunch of potions because we think it's awesome. We think, you know, we want to help people in developing nations. I think that's also going to be an increasing part of the narrative and the story moving forward.
And what I really find incredible, and I just want to sort of put an emphasis on it, is the volumes that are flowing through these platforms. So a top Sorare account with a large collection of uniques that can participate in quite a few tournaments can earn or can make in both ETH and card rewards anywhere between a few thousand, but up to 20, 30, 40,000 per week dollars in terms of returns, depending on the rewards you end up getting based off of your placements. And those are massive revenues that I know from my side, but from sort of Blackpool hat on, we partake in all of those tournaments, and those are significant revenues and deals that are generated by these NFTs issued by Sorare. And equally, I think, Gabby, you can maybe speak to this a bit, but I know the number of SLP that you end up farming on every 3 or 4 days, it's like 1 million SLP every 3 or 4 days, and it seems to just be accelerating with 1,300, 1,400 scholars that are borrowing Axies from you to play the game and splitting the economics of that. I mean, that's a mind-blowing number of people that are actually depending ultimately on YGG, but benefiting from YGG and the entire ecosystem that is being created. So maybe you can speak a bit to that as well, to share some of the numbers as well.
Sure. So in the first 5 months of the year, where basically the Axies were still on Ethereum layer 1, we were able to get to around 1,000 scholars. From May to kind of end of June, we've actually almost doubled that. We're at 1,900 now, so close to 2,000. And yeah, just going on the Ronin side chain of Axie has really accelerated our growth. And we're unique in that we don't buy these NFTs to sell them. So we don't actually trade or sell any of our NFTs. So all of the NFTs we buy has to have some form of yield generation, because that's what's important for our players. We don't make money by selling Axies. We actually haven't sold any Axie on the marketplace, which has been extremely liquid, by the way. We could make money if we try to do that. But what we really want to do is kind of scale up the player base that is coming into play-to-earn games in Axie Infinity and other games. So there are 16,000 players in our community now. 1,900 are in Axie. It's generating 1 million SLP, as you said, every 3 or 4 days, which is around $140,000. Now, the player community ultimately keeps 90% of that. So we've already distributed over $2 million worth of SLP to our player base. And this has just really had an incredible effect in the lives of our players around the world, especially those in developing countries such as Philippines, Indonesia, Venezuela, where in some cases people have been able to buy a house from basically playing and earning SLP.
And there was a fantastic documentary that you released as well on the topic that I really recommend anyone who has a bit of time and is interested to go watch. I think it's called Play to Earn. It's probably, I think, the title of it. So no, I mean, that's fantastic. It's incredible to see the impact that it has, and also the amounts of value that are flowing through ultimately players of a game in the very early stages. The numbers you described, I know at Blackpool as well, between the sort of scholars in Axie that we support, but also from Sorare and Comet, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing through these entities on almost on a weekly basis that ultimately end up in both cases of Blackpool and YGG being a sort of index on the in-game economies created on top of this technology, which I think is really fascinating. But I guess coming back to the NFTs themselves, in terms of the sustainability of the in-game economics for the long term, because if we think about these numbers, which obviously are quite large, and you think 1, 2, 3, 10 years ahead, how do you consider in both Sorare and Axie Infinity the sustainability of the NFTs that you are issuing? I know in Sorare there's very specific sets of guidelines, and you're extremely transparent about what is sold on auction, what is given as rewards between the rare, super rare, and unique cards. But do you think that at some point when you start scaling to a huge amount of users, actually maybe those rarities are not good enough anymore, and you need a less rare type of card class, for example? How do you think about the next 5 years in terms of scaling your platforms?
Yeah, so it's a tough question, to be honest, Max, because you know, the concept of game economist is a very new concept, and the concept of game economist of an open economy is even newer, and I think it's just like not a proper existing job. So it's a challenge, but it's a very interesting one. You know, in the case of Sorare, we have 3 scarcities: unique, 1 out of 1, super 10 out of 10, or 1 out of 10, and rare 1 out of 100. And so, you know, what we've seen is that the demand has really outstripped the supply of cards that we have, and the impact of that is that it has increased the prices of cards in the game, meaning that actually right now Sorare is not as accessible as we would like it to be, which is one of the bigger challenges that we have and that we are working on. And I think, you know, the end game and the end vision for Sorare, and I'm sure for Axie and New Guild, is to, you know, reach millions of users all around the world. And, you know, to do that, you need to be as accessible to anyone in the Philippines or Colombia or France or South Korea. So it's definitely something that we are actively working on, and you know, issuing digital cards, and it's always, you know, really paying attention to the secondary market, the liquidity, how the market is behaving in general. But basically, like, when you issue a new scarcity, like, and that's something that we're thinking of doing, we think that the value will rise for everybody, because actually you create more demand by having something that's more accessible. And this is what we're really looking at, and more than, you know, issuing more cards, it's actually adding more utility to these cards. And so I think, you know, having this open economy where anyone can build an experience around the cards or around, you know, the Axies is definitely something that we are pushing, because, you know, we truly think that having multiple layers of utility accrues more value for the end user, as in the NFT owner. And I think that's what's really, really interesting here.
There are definitely a lot of factors into balancing these economies. I think it's you know, definitely a big responsibility. The awesome thing, though, is that these are, you know, pretty free markets, and there's a lot of awesome data that we get as developers, right? And that helps us kind of balance the economy. Something like the Axie supply, for example, is quite reflexive, right? It's like, you know, as more players come into the ecosystem, the breeders, like, they, you know, they see that, and they basically start to create more Axies, right? And that helps, you know, keep up with the demand. And I guess on the flip side, right, is if the game is, you know, if the Axies are so expensive that nobody wants them, you know, the price is going to go down, and you know, we might hit an equilibrium and find out where the demand actually is, right? I think the main thing that we can do long term is to continue trying to bake as much fun into these assets, right? So and also, yeah, adding more utility. I think personally, I think Axie has it kind of easy compared to a lot of NFT projects, because I think digital pets are actually another entire new booming industry that we're going to see. And I think Axie is actually one of our secret weapons, is that actually we're not just, it's not just about disrupting games and making a new type of game. It's also about this new type of pet. So there are people who just love their Axies, never want to sell them. They don't care about using them to make money, but they have these really emotional connections to them, and I think that also really makes and helps the economy be sustainable in the long run. Right? I also think it's about the community too, right? It's about also because it's about like there's so many different types of value that you get from the Axie ecosystem. It's not just play to earn. There's also, you're learning about blockchain, right? There are people who pay a lot of money to like try and learn about blockchain technology. You're making friends. You're getting this competitive aspect. So I think it's also right, like these other aspects of the game is actually what makes play to earn sustainable.
I absolutely love that. I actually quite regularly come across on Twitter people tattooing their Axies on their arm or on their leg. I mean, that sort of shows you the ultimate amount of conviction in assets that you hold. And I think it's a really good point to maybe double click on in terms of the emotional relationship that you have, whether it's with a digital pet or in the case of Sorare, with the football clubs that you support. Really, it's a representation of digital IP rights ultimately, but it's more importantly a direct link or skin in the game with your football club. And I know that ever since I started playing Sorare, I watch football games very differently, much more interested than I previously was, simply because I know I have skin in the game. And I think for an entire generation that has grown up with the ability to have skin in the game in the tech world, in the investing world, in being able to own part of culture, ultimately, this is increasingly important. And then the second point about sort of baking in more and more utility, making sure that yield sustains itself, I think will lead to a continued interest in some of these NFTs, where actually you might end up having created a monster that is too good to contain. I know when, for example, when we bought the unique Mbappe card in Sorare, there was a lot of chatter about the price of 116 ETH being extremely high. But I was just checking the stats earlier. That card alone has actually helped sort of recoup over 22 ETH worth of prizes already in a couple of months. And so over the next 10 years or 15 years of his career, I think it's an extremely valuable asset to hold. And the entire sets of whether the Axies or Sorare cards tend to have that function baked into them. But so I guess one of the sort of the side questions to that is, excluding the high-end part of the assets, what I really love seeing is that if I'm spending time in the Sorare Discord, the majority of new people who are joining are football fans. They're not blockchain people. And in the same case, often the case with Axie and YGG. The question is, how do you scale the tech to support that? I know, Axie, you moved to Ronin recently. Brian, maybe you can speak about a bit about Sorare's plans as well in terms of scalability, but also the way that people have to interact with crypto. Do they need to know what Ethereum is, or can just interact with a credit card? All of your plans on that front on Sorare would be great to dive into.
Sure. I mean, I think, it was Chris Burnisk who was saying that DeFi is bringing the financial masses to blockchain, and NFTs is bringing the cultural masses to blockchain, and that's always kind of been part of the end game for us at Sorare, is to bring crypto into the hands of mainstream users and have them use it without really knowing it, and actually learning about the really cool superpowers of crypto and NFTs through the game. And so, to do that, obviously, there's a lot of hurdles to come across, and one that we've had to come across at Sorare is definitely scaling the game and scaling on a blockchain that can help us have this level of interoperability, that level of security that we need. And so we're scaling on Ethereum a bit differently than what Axie is doing with Ronin. On our case, we're scaling with Starkware, so we are getting going on ZK rollups. And we've chosen this solution because we think that long term that's a very interesting solution, and we found a very interesting partner, And it's true that it will enable so many more features and such a better experience for all the users at the end. With Tark, where you won't need to understand what a wallet is, you won't need to understand all these complexities while still being able to withdraw your cards anywhere over Ethereum, and while still being able to sell your cards anywhere over Ethereum. So I think that's really what we want to bring is abstract the complexity of blockchain while still providing all the value that comes with being able to fractionalize your NFTs, sell them elsewhere, play with these NFTs elsewhere. And this is the kind of route we're taking. So we never actually talk about NFTs. We never mentioned the word NFT before January 2021 because we thought it wasn't something that people would be interested in or understand. Obviously, it has exploded, and now NFT is becoming a word in itself. But yeah, I think if we want to reach millions of users, we need to talk about digital trading cards and show the value by usage rather than explain the value on the landing page of what it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what's needed in terms of the abstraction away of all the elements that a new user would typically be faced with if they enter the DeFi ecosystem, for example. And I think that's where all of you are really trailblazing for the industry, because you're not targeting the DeFi crypto rich user, you're targeting a football fan, a gamer, or anyone who wants to start making an income stream out of these in-game economies. And so you have to cater to that. I don't know, Jiho, maybe you want to speak a bit about Ronin as well. I know that was a massive success on your side, that shift over, looking at some of the numbers ever since you made the transition.
Sure. So, 54% of our users found out about Axie from a friend or a family member, right? So what this is telling me is that, right, we're really focused on just delivering benefits and an amazing experience to our users. And if we can do that, and the technology that we use can do that, or does that, then we're going to grow. So I think we really just focus on making sure that we're creating something that people are dying to tell their friends and family about. If that's happening and they're able to actually onboard their non-crypto friends, then we're doing our job right. I think when we set out 3 years ago, that we always knew that if our current users are able to get their wives, their family members, their grandma to play, then we're gonna win. So I think we've always just been building towards that. We haven't tried to maximize anything ideologically. We've focused on what the users are saying, how they're behaving, are they actually referring people? I think that's been key.
Yeah, no, I think that's an extremely high number, and equally, I know in the case of Sorare, since your French team national announcement, we've had a few additional players who have joined, I think through word of mouth, via Antoine Griezmann, who's convinced his FC Barcelona players, colleagues, to start playing Sorare as well. So from me spreading it within friends and family all the way to national football stars spreading it across themselves. I think it's an incredible sort of tight-knit community that have ended up building and participating within these ecosystems. I think we have just 2 more minutes left, so just wanted to sort of wrap it up with maybe 1 or 2 anecdotes that you found fascinating while building Yield Guild games, Axie, Sorare. I have a bunch that spring to mind, but I would love to hear from you. Maybe Gabby, starting with you, especially on the collective good aspect of YGG.
Yeah, there are actually so many stories of people putting food on the table, or basically repairing their house, providing medicines for their relatives. Most of our users are new to crypto, so we're onboarding most of these people to crypto via these NFT-based games, and we're allowing these people who are, a lot of them are living in emerging economies, to basically be connected to the crypto economy and to the metaverse. And Just doing this means that it doesn't matter now where in the world you are. If I have a mobile phone and an internet connection and a crypto wallet and I could play one of these games, that means I'm already connected to the global crypto economy. And it's just a very powerful force of good. And it allows people to really easily onboard to crypto because you're not teaching them DeFi, you're not teaching them to trade, you're teaching them how to play a game and earn money. And it's just been really incredible way of onboarding users easily to the crypto economy.
I think that's going to be hard to top at this point. I think there's about 20 seconds remaining, so I don't know if Brian or Jiho want to jump in.
I mean, I've been amazed by people like Gabby who have kind of like seen the opportunities that Axie creates, right? So like for me, it's this entire entrepreneurial class of people that are building stuff on top of Axie, are diving into the NFT ecosystem. I think it's just it's kind of unleashing talent, and it's kind of like a true meritocracy, right? Where it's kind of like finally a free market. I think it is about like economic freedom for gamers. At the end of the day, and so when you give people freedom, a lot of like unexpected behaviors, you see a lot of heroism. So I think like really it's kind of like what's always astounded me is the kind of acts of valor that come from our community. So, and I think it is because it's not just a new type of game. It's actually like giving freedom to people who have never really experienced it. Especially in this context. So.
I love it. Freedom in the digital world, in cyberspace, which is increasingly important. Super. Look, thank you very much for joining us. I know especially for Gabby and Jiho, it's probably close to 1 a.m. at this point for you guys. So I really appreciate that you took the time. But passing back to Lata, who will do the closing.
Yeah, thank you all for a really great panel. It's conversations like these that really make me feel like mass adoption of our spaces is imminent. So for everyone watching, we'll see you all soon for potentially our most exciting event of the week, Ethereum, the future of finance and more, where Vitalik Buterin, inventor of Ethereum, will be interviewed by Richard Waters, West Coast editor of the Financial Times, and Tom Walton-Pocock, head of research at Fabric Ventures. This event will be emceed by Richard Muirhead, managing partner at Fabric Ventures. It's one not to miss. This is the Open Web Forum curated by Fabric Ventures, and be sure to check out our Twitter at @Fabric_VC. See you all in 18 minutes.